I was working from home, as most people are at the moment. Really busy work day, sort of mind was all over the place. And I got a text message from what I was led to believe was HMRC. Bit of a precursor to that. My husband and I, we rent out a small property near where we live. So we did just receive a genuine letter from HMRC to say that we needed to pay some tax that was owed on the property from a previous tax year. And that was only a small sum of about sort of 500-ish pounds, but it had taken me a little while to get that payment made and process it. So it had sort of been left for a little while. And so when I got this text, so I had literally just paid that money the day before this text was received. So when I received the text, in my mind, somehow I just felt like, oh, I've left it too long and now it's escalated to something. And I just started to panic because of this payment that we've just recently had to make to HMRC for tax for the property that we rent out. So the text message asked me to contact them, that there was a problem with our account. So I did phone the number and the person who was on the phone basically said that there was going to be criminal charges brought against us, that we had committed tax fraud, that the police would be at the property and they were going to freeze all of our accounts and all of these things, all very scary things. And because I was really busy in my work life and because this tax payment had just been made, I didn't really have a chance to process what was happening for a little while. So I let myself get really worked up, really sucked into this thing. And so, yeah, so that's how it started. And it was only through the phone conversation, the person on the phone said that he was going to transfer me to a colleague to discuss, how this was going to progress further. And all the while I'd said to him, we just checked our Gateway account, everything looked above board. I was not aware of any issues. And so he said he was going to transfer me and not to hang up on the phone. And then something just didn't seem right. Something just didn't feel right. And finally, sort of after all that scaremongering had stopped for about a couple of minutes, my sort of brain managed to catch up with what was happening. And something in my head was like, this isn't right. This isn't how this works. Like, you would have gotten a letter. They don't phone you. And so when the chap came on the phone, it was sort of when the lights had gone on, and I said, I'm not going to talk to you any further. I'm going to phone HMRC and confirm what you're saying is correct. And I hung up. So I did phone HMRC and I confirmed with them actually that was a scam, that he'd had 5 calls explaining that exactly the same thing had happened to other people that day, and that unfortunately this was something that was becoming more and more common. And so he sort of reassured me that everything was fine, that we hadn't done anything wrong. And so that was really good. The gentleman I spoke to on the HMRC website, when I spoke to him, he said that the fraudsters can access people who pay self-assessment. I think there's a public record. I can't recall what it's called, but there's public record of people who are on a self-assessment. And so they go through those records and they contact people based on that. So that makes it more real for people. If you know you're a self-assessed taxpayer and you're being told that you've done something wrong and that you owe back taxes, or you've done something fraudulently, then that makes it all the more real for someone. It's a really frightening experience. And for someone who, I know about internet awareness, I know about safety online, I know about all of this stuff, because my life and everyone else's life at the moment is quite chaotic because of the sort of unprecedented circumstances we're finding ourselves in. And obviously, having had that tax payment just be made, it did allow me to get sucked into that for a little while, and it caused me considerable distress. I was really upset for a little while. Had to step away from my work for an hour or so just to get myself back to, relatively normal after that really frightening experience. What I also found really upsetting was when I shared my experience with people that I knew, they almost laughed it off. They said, oh, we get phone calls like that all the time, we just hang up on it, it's a scam. And that was really frustrating, because I felt like my emotions weren't validated, because I genuinely was very, very upset. Because I handle all my family's accounts. My husband relies on me to ensure that our tax is up to date with that property. And suddenly I thought, what have I done wrong? I'm not an accountant, you know, I do my best, but I thought, oh my gosh, I've made a really big mistake, and how is that going to impact my family? Reported it to Action Fraud, yeah. So I did initially try to phone Action Fraud, but the phone lines were really busy. So then I did the online form. So yeah, that was submitted just to say that this happened. I made sure I made records of the telephone numbers that they contacted me from. So I was able to give that to Action Fraud. Hopefully, you know, that provided some assistance in them sort of shutting that sort of system down. And then because of my sort of previous connections with Citizens Advice, I emailed Alex to let her know that this is something that's happening, so that the more vulnerable people in our community could also be supported in case that happened, just to make sure that they were aware that these were happening and that there was support available. You know, trusting your instincts are a good thing to go with. However, not everyone's instincts are the same, and everybody maybe has different levels of knowledge based on things. So I know that my husband isn't particularly technologically, you know, sort of educated, so he might have a difficult time handling some of these things, or, you know, some of the more vulnerable people in our community. So I think, you know, the way I would approach it is just, if someone does call you, you know, you say you're going to call them back, and just confirm through that company, asking for ID and telephone numbers, just not giving any personal information out over the telephone or over the internet and things like that to protect yourself. Just being aware that a bank isn't going to ask you for your PIN number, or you know, HMRC or debt collectors and things like that. They won't necessarily ask you for any personal information without confirming with you. You know, the more we open that conversation, the more that we say this is happening and it happens to everybody, then it increases everyone's awareness. So that conversation has to be had, because social media, you know, conversations between peers and things like that, that's how people learn about things. It's unfair to sort of expect everybody would just know that that's not real, that, you know, that's ridiculous. Anybody can fall victim to these sorts of scams, these sorts of fraudsters. It does happen to everybody.